closed Catalan. So far we have covered all the major systems after d takes c, b6, and the closed Catalan with bishop b4 check followed by bishop d2, bishop e7, and c6 plan. And this leaves us with one of the most popular continuations for black after bishop e7, bishop g2, castle, castle, move, d takes c. So in this particular position, black almost always develops his bishop from c8, and that's why almost all the top grandmasters choose this option. Now, of course, black can play c6 followed by the same plan as in the closed Catalan, but I mentioned that after simple b3, knight bd7, bishop b2, for example b6. Now white has several options: knight c3 followed by queen c2 and e4, knight bd2 followed by queen c2 and e4. Again, very easy and simple play, which gives white even better chances because the bishop is not stranded anymore on d2. So let's go back and take a look at this position. So this is the topical position of this variation, and here white usually goes after the c4 pawn. So white can play queen c2, and here black plays very smart move a6. The reason why this is a very smart move is because sooner or later white has to take the pawn on c4, and after queen takes c4, b5 with the tempo, queen goes back, black plays bishop b7 and gets to solve one of his main problems in the Catalan, the c8 bishop. And this is why this variation has been recently popular for black. But nevertheless, by solving one problem, black creates another problem. And this is more in terms of strategic value. The key here is the weakness of the c5 square. So ideally, if white can get one of his knights, let's say knight from b1 to c5, and occupy the square, followed by a build-up on the c file, the pawn on c7 is really gonna feel weak, and black has to spend a lot of energy and time defending that pawn. So now the battle sort of starts for the c5 square. If black can play knight bd7, c5, and even perhaps rook c8, you can say that black has solved all his opening problems and stands equal. So that's why all of white's tries now are attempted at stopping the c5 break. So one of the most popular ways to stop c5 is this quiet looking move bishop to d2. And the main idea is if knight b to d7, then white can play bishop a5. And now it's even tougher for black to do anything, because if you play rook c8, white can follow up with knight bd2 and b4. And really, even though you have bishop on a5 a little bit out of the game, the pawn on c7 and all of black's army surrounding the defense of that pawn, especially the c5 square, also gives white more than enough play for the badly placed bishop on a5. So this is typical plan for white. Now black has tried several ways to counter this move bishop d2. One of them is knight to c6. So stopping bishop a5, at the same time attacking the pawn on d4. This move has been tried by the young prodigy Carlsen, who is now a super grandmaster, against none other than Vlad Kramnik. And Kramnik actually played a superb game and he started out with the move e3. And so what happens now after knight to b4, Kramnik simply took the knight, bishop takes b4, and now he plays a3. For example, bishop e7, knight bd2, rook c8. Black is almost ready to play c5 and solve the problem of the c7 pawn, but now Kramnik plays b4 and seals the deal. The pawn on c7 can no longer move to c5. White obtained the powerful outpost on c5 for his knight. The knight can go to b3 and c5. The other one can go to e5. And this is actually a very instructive win by Kramnik that you're gonna see in the instructive game section of the DVD. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, bishop d2 is aimed to play bishop a5 and stop black from going c5. But here black has this interesting idea, rook to a7. At first this looks like a very awkward looking move, but in reality immediate bishop a5 doesn't benefit white because of the move knight c6, and at the same time black is preparing to play knight bd7, queen a8, and c5. So this is black's idea, and let's see how white plays after rook a7. So here Kramnik played a number of very beautiful games, and he starts his plan with the move rook to c1. Now bishop e4 attacking the queen, and now notice that the pawn on c7 is defended. Queen b3, and here black plays the move knight to c6 with a very simple threat to take on f3 and win the d4 pawn. And Kramnik plays e3, and there were a number of games, in particular a game Kramnik, Leko, and Kramnik, Anand, where black plays queen a8. Notice that there is an x-ray on the long diagonal queen, bishop, and this knight on f3 may be hanging on some lines. So that's why white plays queen d1, defending the knight, and this is very good and prophylactic move. And now white is threatening to play the move knight c3, of course threatening the very powerful bishop on e4. So in this position Leko tried the move b4 without success against Kramnik, and we're gonna cover it in the instructive game section. And Anand has tried a more passive move, knight to b8, and nevertheless he never was able to equalize after the move bishop a5, and we're gonna mention this game as well in the instructive games. So overall, even if black solves the problem of the c8 bishop by playing b5 and bishop b7, he still has a number of problems to solve, in particular the pawn on c7, and if white plays very carefully and doesn't allow c5, then black is going to struggle to find equalizing plan in the opening.